one of the people who will be at the office hours and hours will be our next guest. He is a political scientist, a brilliant man, Professor Jonathan Bick. I'm putting on my glasses because I don't have to look at my notes. There you go. Hey, Professor Jonathan Bick. So we have 30 minutes to go over this and give it the time it deserves, and hopefully you'll keep coming back. What is fascism? Fascism. We hear it bandied about. I hear a lot of right-wingers accusing Nancy Pelosi of being an authoritarian. Kevin McCarthy has accused Nancy Pelosi of being an authoritarian. I wish she were an authoritarian and a socialist. I wish she's neither, because she's nothing. But let's go over it. What is, take the clowns and the Republican Party off the table. Let's go over what fascism is, what authoritarian impulses are in politics. Please.
Well, yeah, I think it is relevant because of the tendencies we're seeing in our national politics. There are these strands of fascist thinking and ideology that are, I was going to say, seeping into our politics, but I think they've penetrated quite deeply, unfortunately. And we've talked about some of these characteristics or beliefs that are consistent with fascism. We talked about how fascism rejects democracy, that fascists do not think that it should be left up to the people to decide how to govern, that it should be left up to an elite. And that's really something that's worth commenting on, because a lot of the conservatives and the fascist adjacent people that are in the Republican Party talk about how they don't like elites, that they're really scary, that they're what's causing the problems in America, whether it's the coastal elites or the academic elites. But fascism is an elitist movement, right? It rejects the people ruling, rejects democracy. So they want a fascist elite to take control. And that's, I think, interesting, because they rarely come out and say that. But it's a small group of people who would run pretty much everything, because it is a totalitarian ideology. And as we said before, it rejects socialism, rejects trade unionism, rejects feminism. It's got a very narrow and defined way of looking at women's role in society. And it places the state above the individual. And this is a state that is obviously undemocratic, and it's usually led by a charismatic leader.
Which is interesting. I'm sorry. I've got a power bar in my mouth. I guess I should swallow.
As long as the federal government isn't shoving it down your throat, David.
Yeah, somebody's shoving it down my throat. The people who are fascists in this country, the authoritarians, attack the state. They are the ones who say the government is evil. They accuse us of being statists. How do you square that?
Yeah, that's, there's not a lot of cohesion in what's being forwarded by people on the right in this country. On the one hand, they're saying, oh, watch out for that federal government, watch out for big government. We should be able to drown it in the bathtub, as you were quoting Grover Norquist earlier. On the other hand, They want the state to intervene in the most personal aspects of people's lives. You know, what they do with their bodies, who they sleep with, whether or not they have children, whether or not they can use contraception, whether or not they can use, substances that change people's consciousness. You know, they're against, for example, legalizing marijuana. But they're for the police powers of the state. They have no problem with capital punishment, which is the state killing its own citizens. Right? They have no problem with giving police unrestricted power to carry out their jobs or what they see as their jobs. They have no problem with Homeland Security, with all these different agencies.
And the neoliberal order is myopic. They can't see past the next quarter. And so when they see an authoritarian, they see temporary relief to chaos and a continuation of their profits. But they're unable to see the distant horizon. Right? At the beginning, the financiers, the industrialists, will always fall over themselves for a fascist leader, because in the short term, which is all they're capable of thinking, we know that. We know Wall Street can only see what's the next quarter. They go, yeah, martial law sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it happened in Nazi Germany and
Chile,
Italy.
Chile.
The industrialists sided with Hitler and with Mussolini. And, you know, the Nazi party probably would not have come to power had it not been for the largesse that was visited upon them by the right in Germany. So that's, you know, something to be aware of and to watch out for, because, you know, the money that's coming to support the Republicans and the far right is coming from the industrialists and those in certain industries and businesses that echoes, you know, what happened in the 30s and 40s.
And this is more than just fascism. I mean, it's the story of royalty, British royalty, where you cannot be king unless you have the backing of the aristocracy, and the aristocracy is made up of lords with their own troops and their own land, and they kind of consent to who should be king. And then, you know, if you read all the King's Men, is it Robert Penn Warren who wrote? Not Robert Penn, who wrote? I can't remember who wrote all the King's Men, but they create, you know, the Louisiana. Speaking of Scalise, they find a rube and they make him their king, and a couple of the aristocrats die and suffer from that along the way, because soon the idiot who is king, because only an idiot would want to be king, he thinks he's actually in charge, and he does always do damage to the people, some of the people who put him there. They can't help themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly was the case with fascism. I mean, every fascist regime that has existed is ended in, you know, utter destruction.
Well, what about Spain and Franco? That horrible stories, but that seemed to have lasted until the 70s. He died.
Right. And you could say the same of Pinochet as well in Chile, who I think many would say was a fascist. Yeah, I mean, they did enormous damage to those societies, right? I mean, enormous trauma. And it still lives on to today in the split that is still evident in Chile and Spain, and the scar that's been left by the fascist past. Um, so, in both of those cases, you wouldn't say that fascism was a success.
Right.
And
So Godwin's law, let's go back to, I interrupted you. Godwin's law says we've lost the argument if we invoke Hitler, which also means we've lost the argument if we invoke fascism. That if you call something what it is, you've lost the argument. That it's unfair to call the authoritarians in this country fascist. So let's without, I don't want to lose the argument. Continue, please, describing what fascism looks like.
So I would say very quickly that Godwin's law, I never subscribed to that, and I just thought it was silly. Well, you can never mention Hitler or else you lose the argument. I heard someone recently say the same thing about World War II. Oh, can't bring up World War II. Right. Really? I mean, if it's appropriate, you bring it up, right? If there are parallels, if it helps to, shed light on the current situation, then you should do so. You should point out the differences. But I would not, steer clear of any parallel that makes sense. Okay, so fascism, really centers on the state, and it, Mussolini said everything is in the state, and nothing human or spiritual exists, much less has value outside of the state. Thus understood, fascism is totalitarian. That's a direct quote from Mussolini's writing. And the state is supreme. There's a charismatic leader, which is the expression of the authority of the state. The individual exists to serve the state in a fascist regime. There's no need for individual freedoms because the state needs to be free to protect the nation by any means necessary. And fascism often leads to a police state and government terror against its own people. So another characteristic that we can talk about is fascism's glorification of war and militarism. So most ideologies will say that war is something to be avoided. We should only use it in self-defense or a last resort. But for fascism, war is good. In the words of one fascist leader, war is to man as childbirth is to women. Mussolini said, war alone brings up to their highest tension all human energies and puts the stamp of nobility upon the peoples who have the courage to meet it. Hitler said in a 1928 speech, whatever goal man has reached is due to his originality plus his brutality. One is either the hammer or the anvil. We fascists confess that it is our purpose to prepare the German people again for the role of the hammer. So it's these, images of violence, images of force that are brought up and used to justify violence in order to protect the state and to protect society against its enemies. And I think very important for today is that most fascist regimes use a paramilitary to help achieve power and then maintain its power and control after it's in power.
What does that mean? What is explain what a paramilitary organization is, please?
Right. So the paramilitary organization is a group that is trained in violence, but it is not necessarily a part of the government itself. So it's extra judicial, extra legal. And so, for example, in
I
Nazi,
don't understand. Explain that to me. So you're saying that I can't wrap my head around this. You're saying the people in charge, the government, will hire their own enforcers instead of using the police or somebody like Milley's Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley's army. Why do you rely on your own people instead of your army? You're the president, or why wouldn't you just use your army or your police?
well, they use it to get, first of all, to achieve power, right? So they're not before they come to power, before they have control of the state, they need to have this force to intimidate their political opponents, to intimidate anyone who would, stand up to them. In Nazi Germany, you had the brown shirts, or the SA, which stood for assault detachments. And these were essentially thugs in uniforms that they made themselves, brown shirts, black leather boots, that would go around and beat up their opponents, kill them on occasion. And you also
So the brown shirts were not sanctioned originally by the German government.
that's correct.
And they were.
Neither was the SS, by the way.
So this was the Nazi Party's own militia.
That's correct. That's correct.
And then when Hitler took power, he absorbed the SA and the SS into the government, but eventually.
Right. It took time. And also, though, with the SS, so the SS, I mean, they actually got rid of the SA.
The Night of the Long Knives.
Night of the Long Knives, right? There was an internal struggle, and the SS was basically took over. And what's interesting about that, under Heinrich Himmler, the SS became an independent organization that was part of the Nazi state, but its power structure was set up so that it was it gained its authority directly from the Führer. So they had this Führer authority where they could do things that German law would otherwise prohibit.
Oh, I see. So somebody who's in charge has to deal with the bureaucracy that predates him. And many of the people in the bureaucracy, especially the army and the police, have sworn an oath to either protect the Constitution or the people, so they won't carry out the illegal orders coming from a leader who they view as temporary.
Right.
So if you're trying to perform, what is it called, an auto coup? A self coup, where when you're in power but you want to stay there, you're up against a bureaucracy in the police and the army that will not follow your orders because they're not allowed to follow your orders.
And we saw Trump, right? Toward the
we're not. We've lost the argument. We've lost the argument.
Okay.
We're not going to bring up the deep, dark state and the demonization of the people who've sworn an oath to the Constitution.
Well, I was going to say,
ahead. Of course, bring up Trump.
Replacing people at the end of his term, right? In the military, and Admiral Milley tried to point this out recently. So people were getting quite the ones you're talking about, right? That were true to their oath to the Constitution and to the country. They said, wow, what Trump is doing here is really disturbing because he's replacing people with his flunkies, people who would presumably do whatever it is he wanted.
So let's stop being coy here. We are up against authoritarians and fascists, and it's not just Trump. And what you see Tucker Carlson doing is going after the deep dark state, going after the CDC, attacking every arm of the government, illegitimizing the entire federal government so that we all lose faith in the government, chaos, and then a strong man emerges. And suddenly, when the strong man emerges, and Michael Flynn is chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, then Tucker Carlson has faith in government. Right?
Right. Yeah.
We should always be wary of government, is what the Republicans say, until they have complete and utter command.
Then
they have commanding heights of our government, then Tucker Carlson's true colors show.
Yeah. I mean, the parts of the government that they, detest the most are those that actually help people. Right. So the CDC or, they won't say it, but Social Security and Medicare and FEMA, any part of the government that actually serves a social purpose that is conducive to people's health or well-being, that's what's problematic. Anything assistance to the poor, food stamps, anything like that, that's what they really go after. But as far as the security apparatus, they don't have too much of a problem with that, particularly when they're in control of it.
Right.
So,
So if we were doing a grift, because what we're spouting is history and facts. And, this the universe we're swimming in order to get massive numbers is not to parrot the truth, because it's not a fresh take. You're just reviewing what we already know. So I feel compelled, I'm joking here, to give a fresh take so people will think I'm smart and come at it from a different angle and deny that we're up against an authoritarian, fascist impulse that's growing in America. That's too easy. So I'm going to come at it from a different angle, Professor Jonathan Bick. I'm going to suggest that it was Franz von Pappen's fault that Hitler came to power. Franz von Papen was the vice chancellor of Germany. And while he himself was a pretty bad guy, like Nancy Pelosi, if he had just offered an alternative, Franz von Papen, Hitler never would have come to power. So that's my take, to come at it. It's wrong and stupid, but it's different.
It's different.
And it's different. And so this is what will get me an audience, because I'm coming at it from a fresh angle. Doesn't matter if it's rooted in any truth, because nobody really knows who Franz von Papen is. But if only Franz von Papen had not been a self-dealing vice chancellor, we could have stopped Hitler. So basically, it's Nancy Pelosi's fault. Who is Franz von Papen? If you look, Franz von Papen was just as bad as Hitler, and Nancy Pelosi is almost just as bad as Trump and Kevin McCarthy. She sugarcoats her venality. But it is not Nancy Pelosi who we have to destroy, figuratively.
Yeah, that strikes me as irresponsible to make that argument. Yeah.
Yes, but we hear that a lot of people have to come up with original takes. So instead of focusing on the threat, a legitimate threat on January 6th, because weren't the people on January 6th, weren't they brown shirts? Didn't Donald Trump say during the debate to the Proud Boys, stand down, stand by?
Yes, and that is the parallel I was getting to, which is
Oh, sorry. Somebody is talking too much today. I'm going to find out who he is.
Well,
And
let me
heads
know
are
when
gonna
you.
roll.
Let me
I'm
know
going to
who
find
you-
out. Somebody's being a loudmouth today. Go ahead. I apologize.
No, I just wanted to point out that we have these nascent paramilitary organizations in the United States. You mentioned the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, the Oath Keeper. There's a variety of militia groups out there that the FBI has identified as a major threat to the government, to American democracy, in past reports, and saying they're the actual threat. You know, it's not Antifa or Black Lives Matter or these other groups on the left that are mostly peaceful. We have Christian nationalists inside the U.S. military. All these different armed proto-fascist or fascist paramilitary organizations that are just waiting for the right moment and for a charismatic leader. I mean, some of them found that leader in Trump. I think fortunately for us, he's fairly shallow and incompetent in the way he goes about doing things. But you never know, and someone else could come along who isn't as incompetent and as intellectually limited as Trump, and could present a real danger and could solidify these groups and help them to grow. And with all the right-wing money sloshing around out there, a lot of it could be directed to these groups and to make them into a real threat, the way that the Nazi Party was made into a real threat in the 30s.
And they've infiltrated our police forces and our military, because we now know that there were cops, DEA agents, storming the Capitol that day. Janet Napolitano was the governor of Arizona, and President Obama made her head of Homeland Security. When she first was in charge of Homeland Security, she did a report, and she said the biggest threat to America is domestic terrorists. And those domestic terrorists are white nationalists and white separatists, the militia. You are more likely to die from their terrorism than you will from the Muslim Arab terrorists we're spending this fortune on to fight overseas. Our biggest threat, according to Janet Napolitano, they prepared a report, and the Republicans killed it. They killed this report because that's their constituency. And at the time, this was in 2009, what was that, 12 years ago, 11 years ago? There were still some Republicans who said, yes, we have some of our constituents are white nationalists and militia members, but we're not all sympathetic to them. But it makes us look bad. For political reasons, bury it. Today, that is the Republican Party. That is the Republican Party.
And I wish the Democrats would make this clear to people, right? Stop trying to work with them and come up with these watered down bipartisan pieces of legislation, and which they're never going to sign anyway, which they're never going to pass anyway, and make it clear what the Republican Party has become today. It is a real threat. It's a threat to the well-being of the Americans and to our democracy, and I think they should be clear about that. And while you have control of the FBI and other security organizations, have them issue these reports again.
And enforce the laws that are on the books, as long as the GOP insists that Nancy Pelosi is a socialist. I wish, if they can throw the term socialist around, we should be throwing fascist around.
I agree with that.
Because the Republican Party in its current iteration is more fascist than the Democrats are socialist. Period.
Without a doubt.
Let's continue this, Professor Jonathan Bick. Are you going to be teaching at office hours on Friday night?
I will be. Yes, I'll be talking about democracy again, continuing my talk on that.
Yeah. I'm sorry to my listeners. I wish I could come up with a fresh take that just isn't rooted in truth and history. And, I wish I could tell you that von Papen is the one who, if we'd just gotten von Papen to provide universal medicine to the people of Germany, Hitler could have been stopped. I know that would be a fresh take, but there are two things happening at once, Professor. You have a Democratic Party that is horrible, that is ignoring the pain and suffering of the American people, the eviction crisis. This is obscene that Biden gave Pelosi 2 days to fix the eviction crisis. It's criminal. It is criminal.
Yeah, millions.
That doesn't mean, I'm sorry, what?
Millions of people are going to be suffering because of that. I saw that estimates up to 10 million people could be evicted. It's going to be in the millions.
Yes. And they will veto Medicare for all. Biden, they're terrible. But this Republican Party is a whole other category of terrible. A whole other category of terrible. And you can't both sides this. And if you look, to be continued. We didn't even touch on the infrastructure bill. Professor Jonathan Bick, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave.